Channel 4's lesbian and gay magazine programme is out.
Good evening. Welcome to the annual Out Studio Thrash around a big issue. Tonight is the fish and bicycle debate. Do love and marriage go together for lesbians and gay men? In Denmark and a significant number of American cities and states, there are some kinds of domestic partnership rulings or actual legislation in favour of gay men and lesbians. The question is, should homosexual people, I'm sounding like Newsnight, should we have access to legal marriage on an equal basis with heterosexuals? Or is that merely trying to buy acceptance with an institution which is even going out of fashion with heterosexuals? One thing about being gay is that you don't have to get married. You don't have to manacle yourself to someone and then take half their house away. You can live a free, independent and single existence. But perhaps marriage actually is the ultimate state of bliss, the end of the Barbara Cartland novel, the end of uncertainty and fiction, the beginning of real life, a gay marriage, a father and 2.4 cats, or more seriously, a mother and their child. Does marriage also not just bring stability and 15 ironing boards, but a whole basket of benefits, immigration, tenancies, welfare and taxes, which gay people are currently excluded from? So, the debate. Is marriage a state of stability and acceptance, or a surrender of our essential identity to an institution that needs changing and is even being deserted by its heterosexual founders? Tom Stoddard, American lawyer and executive director of Lambda, which is the major national gay legal organization in the States. Tom has lived with Walter, his chap, for 3 years, a relationship that he describes as spectacularly successful. And with Walter not here, we'll just have to take your word for that, Tom. Paula Ettelbrick is the legal director of Lambda and is vice president of the National Lawyers Guild of America. She lives with her girlfriend Catherine in Brooklyn and has no cats. Angie Weir, author of the Cohabitation Handbook, a long-time cohabitee herself, is a mother and a London solicitor. John Clark is co-secretary, male, that should be said, of the International Lesbian and Gay Association. He lives in Austria with his lover of 12 years, Andre, who is Polish. And therefore, John, thank you very much, is our contribution to Glasnost and the New Europe. And I'm Simon Fanshawe, tragically single, 34, Capricorn, seeking similar. And so, the question is, should gay men and lesbians be able to get married? Tom and Paula, who work in the same office, take opposing views, which must make interesting 9-to-5 behaviour. Tom, you recently wrote that you believe that the right to marry should be a stated goal of the gay rights movement. Why?
Why? It's quite simple. The law and society should offer absolute equality to lesbians and gay men. If heterosexual couples can marry, can choose, so should homosexual couples be able to do so. For practical reasons, perhaps for religious reasons, if they have them, for political reasons, for whatever reasons those individuals might choose. There has to be absolute equality. I should add that I'm not promoting marriage itself. In fact, I believe that there are many disadvantages to getting married, and although I love Walter very dearly, I think our relationship is spectacular.
I want to meet Walter. I really want to meet Walter.
Well, I wish he were here, but he's not. But I don't think we choose to get married. I don't think that that would be the institution, if that's the right word, that we would choose to become a part of. But I think that the world should offer, and every society should offer, the right to those couples who choose. I also believe that until the world does that, our relationships will be viewed as secondary, will be viewed as on another track and not entitled to the same sanctity or observance by others that heterosexual couples are entitled to.
Paula, that sounds a very reasonable proposition that Tom's made. Why do you disagree with it?
I really find it outrageous that we would build a system and want to build on a system that only highlights and promotes one kind of relationship, a marital relationship. I think people have different kinds of relationships in our society. There are different kinds of groups of people who live together who consider themselves family. Lesbian couples, gay couples, their children, elderly couples who live together for companionship, often economic reasons, disabled couples who may live together for the same reason. And I think what we need to do is look at family as a matter of function, break down the barriers, get away from the two-tier system of people who have all the benefits and people who have none of the benefits, and be a little bit more realistic about what our society is and where we're going.
But the thing is that an awful lot of people, gay people, want to choose it now, so it obviously performs some kind of function for people.
Well, I think it does, but it's only in the way that heterosexual people have dictated that function. I mean, they've sort of held it up to this primary kind of relationship, and we've bought into that. By even requesting it, we've totally bought into this institution. And quite frankly, you know, I don't think it really promotes the goals that I still hold dear of gay liberation.
Angie, you're a solicitor, so I'm going to turn to you to say, in the first place, when you buy into marriage in that way, if you're heterosexual, what do you buy? What do you get? What are the benefits?
You buy rights in relation to children, you buy rights in relation to your occupation of your home. You buy rights in relation to the ownership of that home. You buy rights in relation to a number of private benefits, health benefits, occupational pensions, rights in relation to immigration, which you mentioned in your opening. You also buy into the possibility of divorce.
John, would you like to get married?
I personally, yes, I would.
What kind of... Well, we're going to talk about ceremony later.
I would like to have my partnership, which is now 12 years, I would like to have it registered, and not so much from an emotional standpoint, but from a legal standpoint. Yeah.
Isn't that really a question, though? I mean, to come back to you, Paul, isn't your argument an exclusive one in the way that Tom's is not? Tom's is an inclusive one and says, well, actually, people should have the right, the access, the possibility even of getting married. I mean, you must allow people choice in some form.
Yes, but the true choice would be no matter what they decided, you know, that their relationship would still be recognized, you know, on some level. At some level, what I would rather have is a world in which marriage ultimately becomes irrelevant because other relationships are recognized, other rights are given, you know, we don't need marriage. I mean, it is a property-based system that has always benefited men and never benefited women and children. It really does historically look at women and children as property. And I think, you know, one interesting thing about this debate, and I think the way it's even been set up here, is that there is something of a gender distinction in terms of, you know, how we think about these things and how we emotionally
But Angie was making the point that the benefits that flow from marriage normally flow in, at the moment, flow in favour of women.
Well, they protect women because women are in an unequal partnership, particularly an unequal economic partnership with the men they live with. So a lot of marriage law is about a rather complicated way of trying to correct that imbalance between men and women. And it doesn't do it very successfully, and it causes a great deal of conflict and emotional heartache. And rather than sort of buying into that system, which is patently not working very well, it would seem to me one should look for other routes whereby one can try and create equality between men and women and men and women in domestic situations.
So you're saying, in a way, you're agreeing with Paula that there is this two-tier situation which is created between those that are sort of legitimised in a kind of one-to-one couple situation, be they gay or straight.
Yes.
And then there's a group of people who are sort of floating around and have no particular protection or status.
Yes, and status or legal rights should flow from real human needs. They shouldn't flow from some status out there.
You know, one of the things we forget is that, you know, the state recognition of marriage also brings with it the state control of relationships. And one thing we saw in the United States just not long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, were bills being introduced into state legislatures requiring people to undergo HIV testing in order to get a marriage license. I mean, that's a prime example of how the state can control people's decision-making about their partnership.
You said you wanted your relationship somehow recognized. That you can get those benefits, but
yeah, Paula has a point though, John.
But partnership is if you get married, or if you're common law spouses, or if you're registered down at town hall, or if you're registered among your friends only, or you're registered in your will. It's all basically the same thing. It's registering it. It's saying that we are a couple.
But you don't have to register, John. In the housing context in the state of New York 2 years ago, a rent control where the named tenant died and the apartment did go to his partner. The law said it goes to a surviving family member, and the court interpreted family to include a partner and looked at the fact that they functioned as family members.
But isn't that a recognition of a relationship?
Yes, but it's not a registration. It doesn't require them to go...
No, but Paula, it's still a recognition of the one-to-one, long-term domestic situation.
Sure.
I mean, you have an interesting distinction here where the two women seem to be arguing from an emotional point of view and the actual reality situation, whereas what you're saying in the end is you kind of want a flat that you can pass on to your partner.
Well, no, I'm arguing two things. I'm arguing, first of all, that there are benefits that attach to marriage that ought to be extended to lesbians and gay couples who choose to get married, and also that there is a recognition factor, a political, philosophical aspect to marriage that deals with the general aspect of lesbians and gay men in the world. My grandparents, for example, who are very conservative, will never believe, it seems to me, that lesbians and gay men are entitled to full equality until they see entry into the institution they think is most important, which is marriage. And that's one of the reasons why I want to push for marriage.
It's still holding holding it up as the only kind of legitimate relationship. I mean, a whole industry is built around it. I mean, look at these, you know, the flowers and tuxedos and gowns and
well, that's
champagne.
why I'd say do it all simultaneously,
but
not
there's
just
a
one.
lot
But doesn't
invested.
that mean, Paula, that if there's a lot invested, doesn't that mean that people are gravitating towards something that they want? They feel strongly about it. And your argument seems to be saying, until we have utopia, you can't have what you want in the short term.
No, that's not my argument. My argument is that we've already made, at least in the United States, some significant changes, you know, without marriage. I mean, my argument is much more of a root social change,
But
not just a rights
social
perspective.
change that gays and lesbians start
But
getting
it's not,
married.
because the root
That's
problem,
something-
the root problem is that there aren't other families, other relationships that are recognized, and you're not going to change that by simply allowing gay people to marry, because all of those, and I think that gay men and lesbians would be sexual outlaws if they decided not to marry, just like, you know, single women are. I mean, it falls mostly on women, I think.
But we said that 10 years ago about heterosexual couples, those living in sin, so to say, that common law spouses will never catch on.
But
And
the
it's
odd
catching
thing
on
is,
more and more.
well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? At the time at which heterosexuals seem to be jumping off the ship, lesbians and gay men are going,
They're
whoopee.
jumping off marriage. They're not necessarily jumping off partnership. And I'm not saying that I don't want to get married in a church. I'm Jewish. I'm going to get married in a synagogue if.
That's a joke by another name, is it not? Excuse me.
And I mean, walking down the aisle in white and with the flower girls and all that. I'm not saying that that's what I want. I want the possibility to register my partnership and to have the legal advantages of that. And also it's a question of visibility. Society is telling us that gays and lesbians cannot engage in long-term relationships. They are unstable. They can't go through this emotional thing. And because they don't see that there are a lot of gays and lesbians living out there.
Let me
in
get some
kind of
free
partnership.
advice for you, John. Angie, couldn't John get those things anyway, through contracts, through other, just civil,
But
am I
not
right?
visibility, I couldn't.
The lawyers will do terribly well out of this debate. It seems to be
Divorce
rather
lawyers do well too,
Divorce
by the way.
lawyers do well. I mean, I think it's profoundly worrying that we sort of all this battle to get out of the closet, and we're going to go back to the hearth and back to the lawyers' offices. I mean, lawyers will be the only people who make a lot of money out of this. Anyways, but besides the domestic partnership registration, what I'm really talking about is having a system of public domestic law in all spheres which protects all people.
There's one thing that still confuses me about this public domestic law. I mean, are you talking about two individuals living in a situation, or are you talking about a way in which of constructing something around each individual?
And the law has been very crude up until now. It is determined relationships and rights dependent solely upon marital status or upon blood. And we're saying, I think I am saying as well as Angie and Paula, that there should be a world in which rights are dependent upon context. And the law should recognize that there is such a thing as Paula put it, the functional family. Domestic violence laws should be different from, for example, succession laws, which should be different from health care, which should be based upon individual need. We need to reconstruct the law based upon context, and we ought to be subtler and more careful and more compassionate than we have been in the past.
There is an argument, and John seems to be making that argument, and I have some sympathy with it, which is that if you have recognised gay marriage or some form of partnership where Tom's grandparents can say, oh, look at young Tommy, settle down with Walter there, you know, come round.
Middle-aged Tom.
Middle-aged Tom. I was trying to help you out there, but never.
But not just those two, but
what I'm
hundreds
saying
of
is
them.
that doesn't that fundamentally change what marriage looks like from the outside? And it does mean that people can say of their teenage child, he or she will grow up, they could get into a gay marriage, they could get into a straight marriage. I mean, isn't that an advance, surely?
Well, I don't think it is. I mean, again, I think what would be an advance would be simply recognizing that there are certain numbers of gay and lesbian people in the world, and whatever they choose, they choose. I mean, eradicating homophobia is more the problem, it seems. You know, my family recognizes Catherine and I as a legitimate couple, you know. And in part, when we bought our apartment, I think that sort of solidified it in her parents' minds and minds. I mean, there was this sort of nesting quality to it. But we didn't need to wave a marriage certificate at them or invite them for cake and champagne. Yeah, just the, you know, just the deed to the apartment.
Yeah, Walter has a brother and a sister who are married, and they simply don't give us the same sort of equal treatment or recognition that they give one another, and that really galls me. And I suspect that if we were able to get married and chose to get married, they would view us entirely differently. And they are in their
feeling
30s.
that they're looking at you as if you're playing.
Yes, they think that we are
It's not the
roommates,
real
essentially. We are gay roommates. They imagine, I think, that we sleep together, but that's the extent of it. They probably don't want to know anything further, and they simply don't think that that our commitment to one another or our love for one another is as deep as that they have for their own partners. And that bothers me a lot. It really bothers me.
Are you worried then, I mean, both Paula and Angie, in a way, that the key problem is that what will emerge is a two-tier system, those relationships which are legitimated, which is couples, and those individuals, men and women, who will be single and therefore in some way even further discriminated against? Angie?
Well, I have other worries as well. I think if we bought into marriage, the rights that accrue on marriage arise out of the differing social and economic positions of men and women. And I think what would happen is that when it came to divisions of property, judges would try and read into lesbian and gay relationships norms that are associated with the male breadwinner and the dependent wife.
It seems to me a fundamental issue is whether or not marriage would change if gay people did become part of it, or whether marriage is so strong that it's an institution which is so central it has no chance to change at all.
Wouldn't it have to change? I mean, marriage is historically sexist. There's no question about it. Women and children were the property of the husband. But stating finally that two men or two women also can enter into marriage would, I think, help to sweep away, if one can do it, ultimately, the sexist origins of marriage. It might be at least one way of doing it.
It wouldn't entirely, because the imbalance in the economic power of men and women would still exist. So that would still fuel the sort of heterosexual norm of marriage. And until that goes, that's what makes marriage important in our society.
Well, the debate seems to be raging. People can't make up their minds. It seems to be the old debate as to whether you infiltrate and change or whether we throw the whole thing out and try and start again. After the break, I'll be back with another group of people, including Derek Jarman and Joanne Lulin, and I'll be doing the Lloyd Grossman bit and prying into their domestic situations and fantasies to see what marriage or partnership means for them in a very emotional sense. So see you then for the juicy bits.
Would you like to be able to get married to a same-sex partner? We can do a bit of a straw poll now, so get on the phone. Phone lines are open now until midnight, and if you call right away, we'll give preliminary results of your vote at the end of tonight's programme, and we'll do the full results in next week's Out.
Sure, won't let you down.
For my permed hair, I want more than just softness. So I use Elegance conditioner. Its unique formula gives my hair that extra bounce.
Elegance conditioner from L'Oreal gently softens your hair without relaxing the curl, so your perm keeps all its bounce.
Now, with Elegance, my hair is so soft, yet my perm looks like new.
Elegance conditioner from L'Oreal softens your hair without relaxing your perm.
Every sound has its own special meaning. The new Citroën ZX. Everything about it says quality.
Down at Birdseye Country Club, we're giving vegetables a new twist. Country Club cuisine, complete vegetable dishes you can make a meal of. The finest vegetables blended with tasty cheese and savory seasonings, with golden breadcrumbs and with imagination. New Country Club cuisine, complete vegetable dishes from Birdseye. Vegetables you can make a meal of.
bet they drink Carling Black Label. I'll just go and ask.
So who knows the answer to this equation? Sean?
Don't know, miss.
All right. What did we use before?
The scale.
Scales. What is it we're trying to find out?
What X is?
What's happening to the scales at the moment?
They're uneven.
Guess what do we have to do?
Take the 10 away.
What does X equal then?
5.
Well done, Sean. That's great. For teaching careers information, ring 0345 300 121.
Welcome back. This is the part of the discussion where I'm going to try and dig deeper with 6 people we've got in the studio. We've argued about the politics and the legal issues surrounding gay marriage. There are gay people in straight marriages and even marriages of convenience. But most of us still live outside marriage. So what sort of relationships do we have? What are the highs and lows about being single or living in a long-term partnership? Do the myths of marriage apply to us? I mean, married people, for instance, don't have sex. They just go shopping. If they had sex, they wouldn't be out on Saturday mornings. Be like, shall we make love, darling? No, let's go and buy some furniture. So what do we look for? What are the influences? What are the constraints on the relationships that we choose? With me are Joanne Lulan, who is 42 and lives with her 9-year-old son near San Francisco. She's a therapist. She's been on TV with Oprah Winfrey, Phil Donahue, and now Simon Fanshawe. She's written 3 books, The Lesbian Erotic Dance, Lesbian Sex and Lesbian Passion, which are, of course, all about ornithology. Derek Jarman is the celebrated filmmaker and writer, soon to be 50, and for the last 5 years romantically involved, or, as he put it, living in sin, with Keith Collins. Clara Connolly is in her early 40s. She was married in her early 20s in Ireland, then came to Britain with her husband, but for the last 3 years has been living with her daughter in a house full of women friends. Simon Harris is an English teacher in a boys' school, and he recently wrote a book called Lesbian and Gay Issues in the English Classroom. Snappy title there, Simon. He writes for the Pink Paper, and the nets have been up and the paint dry for only a matter of moments in the first house he has shared with the banker in his life, Darren. Cecilia Eggleston is in her late 20s and the classic example, perhaps, of partnership bliss. Married in a blessing by a Catholic priest 3.5 years ago, she runs a guest house in Bath with her partner Lynn, which must be very nice for Bath, and I should think pretty good for Lynn too. And finally, Peter Nevin, self-confessed 30-something, works in mental health, training to be a therapist, and works with PACE, the gay counselling organisation. He shares a house with other gay men, and to keep me company is the only other single man on the loose in the studio. Joanne, I want to ask you a question first. Do you, in your experience, feel that for gay people not having a label, a name, something that we can call our relationships actually screws us up a bit?
We have this tendency to not take ourselves seriously. I know there's a lot of controversy in the community that we're always coupled up, and that if you're not coupled up, you're sort of less than, and that comes up so much. Yet what I hear in my office and working with lesbians, that it's really a lot of, I think, lack of honoring relationship. So that, not uncommonly, when lesbians get together, somebody will say, but what if you break up? Or when you break up? Or are you going to move in there? What if you break up? There's a lot of constant, a lot of constant talk about that the relationship isn't going to last. The other thing that I think is that because we have no words to describe, no language to describe what our relationships really are, that we tend to call our lover anyone that we've had sex with, so that it waters down, especially women, especially lesbians.
Do you think that's particularly true of women? Why?
I think so. I don't know. I think it's because we're supposed to be in love to have sex. So if you have sex and you're not in love, you're really bad. So you have to fall in love, so you have to be with somebody so that you can have sex. You know, I want to get buttons that say I'm not half the slut I'd like to be for the lesbian community. But in the meantime, I think we call anyone we've had sex with a lover so that the concept of it gets so watered down.
Simon, do you call Darren something different now you've moved in than you did before? Take me through it. What did you call him when you first met him, and then when you first started going out? Going out, is that the right phrase? And then when you moved in?
As a title, I don't know, I've always sort of been very unsure about what term to use. I suppose I've alighted on lover. I mean, there are things that I hate. I hate other half.
Isn't that the worst?
Revolting.
Makes you wonder, an incomplete person.
I mean, that's just nasty. Partner I don't particularly like either. It's kind of a little bit sort of financial. I've alighted on lover. It hasn't changed since he's moved in. I just call him nuisance now.
Cecilia, what do you and Lynn refer to each other as?
Partner, really. If we're joking, then we will say this is my wife. But then if you do that with people who don't understand, they say, well, who's the husband then?
Derek, would you like to get married?
I never wanted to, Simon, although I did actually propose in a lift about 3 years ago.
To whom?
To Keith. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. And it was accepted.
And where were you going to get married?
Well, we had sort of, I'm afraid, some slightly lurid ideas of sort of ringing up the sun at the time and getting married in Denmark. But then we discovered we couldn't get married. We had to become Danes to become married in Denmark, as someone said.
That was even too much.
That was too much for us, and so we dropped the whole idea. So it's just remained as a proposal that has been accepted.
Clara, you have been married. Have you since entered into a relationship with a woman? And how have the two things compared?
Well, I think it isn't just that one was a marriage and one wasn't a marriage. I think it's also got to do with kind of like a certain stage of your life and what you're looking for and how your expectations of relationships do change. I mean, I desperately wanted not to get into the same sort of thing that I was in before. So, you know, after almost 20 years married, I certainly have played it, although I could say I've had serious relationships since then, I would play it very cool, you know, before I plunged into another kind of life and death, you know, wrap it all up with a house and, you know, sort of committed relationship.
Peter, are you the same? I mean, you sort of, you know, what's the sobriquet? Young, free and single now by choice.
Well, not by choice, they don't think. Well, now by choice in some ways, or my attitude has changed. I mean, I just found myself wondering, I'm lonely, I need somebody, I've got to have somebody, you know. And then and this was driving me crazy, and I thought, hang on a minute, what's really happening here, you know what I mean? I have a whole range of relationships with people in all different manners and in all different ways, all of which I cherish and for different reasons, you know. And I thought, well, that's all right. And I thought, well, that'll do for now, because I'm actually doing other things now. Yeah, I'm actually doing other things, and I don't want to actually tie myself in any particular way to one person.
Joanne, are you looking for anything particular now? Here you are in your 40s, single?
Yeah, single. You know, I was thinking I've mostly been single since I've been a lesbian, and I think that for me too has been so crucial, is that I have this extended family. I have a child, and in the lesbian community it's difficult, and I don't know if Clara finds this as well, but it's very difficult because the lesbian community, especially my generation, always had this notion of rah, we don't have to raise kids. and so then I had a child by insemination, and his father is gay, and so, you know, I have this child around, and a lot of lesbians don't want to hang out. I mean, lovers don't want to hang out with the child, and I have to say I've had a couple of lovers who had tried really hard to do it and just can't do it. I'd love to have the sort of, you know, this fantasy, you know, security and all that kind of thing, but I think it's, at least for me, it's been a fantasy. I'm 42, almost 43. I think I'm just jaded, you know. I mean, I would love to find that, because I think it'd be better for my son in many ways, and I think it'd be better for me. I'd like to, you know, I hate dating.
Just clear up this thing. I have this great thing. If you date with someone, I always think that's before you slept with them. Am I wrong here, or is this...
You know the joke about what a lesbian brings on her second date?
Go on.
Everything. You know, we tend to get together, have sex, and move in together, lesbians.
That's it. Did you meet Lynn and it was very, very quick, there we were?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we were friends for quite a while because I was madly in love with someone else at the time, which is always the way. And we actually... Once we got together, we slept every night together, but we didn't live together for a year.
And how long after that process of, after you moved in, did you decide that what we wanted, I want a ceremony now, I want a blessing?
Not long, I don't think. I mean, because it was, we moved in the February, and we had a celebration in the April.
Did you feel different before and after?
Yes, I think so. I did. I felt that I knew where I was, and that I was very happy in my relationship, and this was confirmation of it, and I wanted, and Lynn wanted, to have a blessing to say this is a relationship that we intend to commit ourselves to, and why shouldn't we call God in on that point? And so we did.
What was the romance of your proposals, Eric, to Keith? I mean,
Well, there was a sort of long period where we got to know each other because I saw him in the front row of a lecture that I was giving in Newcastle. On Christmas Day, I rang the people up who had organised the festival, and I described him, and they happened to know him, and they gave me his phone number.
On Christmas Day?
No, so on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Eve.
It gets worse.
New Year's Eve, I rang him up.
I thought you were the romantic one now, it turns out.
On New Year's Eve, I rang him up, and I don't know what he thought, but he must have been quite surprised. And he came down to London several occasions during the next few months. And eventually, his contract on his work was ending, and he decided to come down and live with me.
How far do you think we are now more interested in permanent relationships?
I think
gay men,
still
I think,
are,
particularly.
gay men, particularly, I think.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Still?
More so, especially sort of like since AIDS has been around, people want to find somebody who is going to, you know, so that they don't have to go out there and, in a sense, put themselves at risk, in a sense.
You know, what I get worried about is that I think it's one of the tragedies of the tragic AIDS epidemic is this whole thing of now we're running around saying to straight people, oh, we're just like you are, don't worry, we're just like you are, and we're not like they are, and I'm really glad we're not like they are.
Isn't it a question of, I mean, phases in one's life, as I tend to think of it? I mean, I think one of the really nice things, for example, about the experience that a lot of women who have come out late as lesbians is that they have a second adolescence. They can get to play it again, which is wonderful, you know, at whatever age, you know, 30, 35, 40, 50, whatever. But it is a sort of, I mean, it's self-consciously a kind of an adolescence, you know what I mean? That you're going out there and doing all these things, and you've had it's kind of in reaction against whatever situation you were in before. But then there comes a time, maybe, when that sort of palls a little bit. So that, you know, it's not a question of we are, or, do you know what I mean? Either lesbians or gay men, interested in one thing or another.
Are we? Don't, I mean,
I think we're very different. I mean,
but as a group? I mean,
yes. I mean, I think we have our own culture, and I think that keeps getting buried.
But in what ways? In what ways? Because I'm constantly struck by the degree of similarities as I get older.
Similarities to what? Now
with
we're
my
getting
other
lost.
friends, with my other friends who
gay
are either
friends or
no,
straight
all
friends?
friends who are in some way involved in either feminism or change or whatever.
I think there are pressures in whatever society you end up in, and I think certainly when I was very naive when I came out into the lesbian and gay community, and the whole thing of people appearing to jump in and out of bed together, for me was totally foreign because I wasn't used to that from anyone. You know,
and for me, it still is.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. And actually trying to then say, well, for me, that's not what I want, was very difficult because I felt under an enormous pressure to go out and be, as I saw it then, terribly promiscuous. I am not the only lesbian who wanted to settle down with another woman and actually have a ceremony of any description to do that. Now, I wouldn't want everybody else to be the same at all, but I think there's also a bit of a pressure to go the other way. I mean, I agree with you that the lesbian and gay community has many facets and many rich qualities that are suppressed in heterosexual life because heterosexuals aren't really allowed to be very individual.
Is that what you're getting at there, Peter? I mean, I sense there's this notion of community, which is both a support and a constraint.
Well, I think we're very, very different. I think we're very different from the mainstream heterosexual world, right? I mean, in the way that we form relationships, in the way we form friendships, in the way that they change variously through our lives, in the way that we have the opportunity through our lives to go through phases where you want to be single, you want to be in a couple, you want to sleep around, you don't want to sleep around. We have that range of choices, you know, and what sometimes I get upset about is that often that range of choices is not even recognised within our gay community itself, you know, even though coupledom is the situation to be in. You know?
Well, that's what I wonder, whether the crucial distinction in life isn't between people who are in couples and people who are single. I mean, what you were saying was that actually your needs change, and that's not a heterosexual or homosexual thing, that's just a human thing, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I'm inclined to agree that there isn't that much distinction, but nevertheless, I would make some, you know, and in fact, I would agree with you that there is a lot more flexibility, a lot more choice, even if the couple relationship is kind of
Still paramount.
is given
It's
higher status,
stability.
that there does seem to be more flexibility, more choice.
I mean, do you feel in your relationship with Keith, for instance, that it's a relationship that could only happen, if you like, between two men? I mean, it's inconceivable in a heterosexual context.
I think so. I mean, I very much like the whole idea of the multiplicity of relationships, Simon, and I, for most of my life, I was very happy in being single and quite promiscuous, and and I actually immensely cherished that area because it was very different to the heterosexual world which surrounded me. And my situation with Keith is that I was middle-aged, let's put it middle-aged, and he was 20 years or more younger than me, so there was another dynamic in this particular relationship. And also, when I met him, I had already been diagnosed HIV positive, so there was that other dynamic in the whole relationship.
What is the difference between you and Darren settling down and your next-door neighbours, I'm assuming for a moment, that they're heterosexual?
There are issues, say, around promiscuity, around monogamy, which, coming from the backgrounds that, say, Darren and I have done, which are live issues, which perhaps wouldn't be the case with two people in their 20s, a man and a woman, setting up a house.
Have you said at all to each other, right, forever, till next week, till the mortgage gets paid?
No. I think all anybody can ever do is commit themselves for the way that they feel at that point in their lives.
Would it be easier, though, if we had, like, a marriage, a partnership, a domestic partnership thing to buy into?
I don't particularly want to have to make some kind of ceremony about my relationship with Darren. All the people who are important to us know anyway. I don't really.
So we're about another $1.5 million now. So
yes, absolutely.
Which would be great.
Which is fine. And I don't really want the kind of intervention which I think legitimisation might bring with it. It was discussed in the first half.
Clara, do you think that not having a ceremony in the way that you did when you married your husband has made the relationships that you have with women seem, either to you or to the outside world, as, quotes, less important, less significant in some way?
Well, I don't think so, but then I suppose I got married in a very sort of, traditional society, and marriage had a very, particular meaning, which was not the meaning that it had for me, or indeed for my husband. But in a sense, we were getting married for our parents. Hi out there. It was for you. And without a ceremony, although I don't see anything wrong in a private ceremony. You know what I mean? I think it's quite important to be able to sort of celebrate with your friends if you want to, and make a statement in front of the people that are important to you. But to involve the state in it, and not just a state, but a whole concept, a whole sort of, long history of what marriage has meant, in the past, and its oppressiveness. I think that it's a great relief not to have that baggage.
Derek, are you glad to be free of that kind of baggage?
I completely agree with that. I mean, I would make a commitment. The commitment is in each other's eyes, and there's no necessity for anything more. In fact, I asked many of my heterosexual friends why they were married in the last week or two, just, since I knew I was coming on this programme, and they didn't really seem to have... Well, they were rather surprised I was asking them, and they seemed to come up with very few, what I might term serious reasons. I mean, they mostly just said for comfort, or, I mean, I sort of don't want to be alone when I'm old, or things like this. That didn't seem to me to be adequate reasons.
Let's just talk about heterosexual marriage for a minute. Peter, I'll ask everybody, anybody. Have you refused to go to heterosexual weddings, or said, I'm not going to be part of it, I can't say whatever?
I wouldn't now, yeah. I'm not part of that setup. I don't want to be a part of that setup, and I want to declare that I'm not part of that setup by refusing to celebrate it in any way.
Someone I was very close to got married, and I must admit I felt very tempted to turn up in a white Rolls Royce with a boy on either arm and yelling, singing, "It should have been me." Have you been to straight weddings? I
haven't been to, I don't even know straight people who get married anymore, so it's,
well, that's the
it's
other
hard.
thing,
It's very,
that straight people aren't. I mean, it's
passé, but...
for our generation, it's very, very different.
Yeah.
I'm just interested, though, the extent to which people get affirmation and status for their relationships from the outside. I mean, there are so many different ways that you do it, and I wonder whether, for instance, I mean, we've talked about your parents a bit. I mean, they obviously feel happy with that situation. I mean, how have your parents now reacted to the change in your circumstances?
Maybe you'll see after this program.
Yeah. I mean, they have been very saddened, I think, you know, both sets, both of whom are Irish. His and yours? Yes. Very saddened by what has happened, in a way that they just simply wouldn't have been if, I suspect anyway, wouldn't have been if we hadn't got married, if we'd just sort of like eloped or gone off to England or something like that. Do you know what I mean? That for them it wouldn't have been such a significant relationship.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's not a real relationship, therefore you haven't broken anything.
What have you told your parents? How involved are they in the...
Well, my parents are both dead, which is one of the reasons why I can come on this programme. I mean,
and you seriously feel that would be...
Yeah, I mean, I love my mother very much, but when she died, it meant an enormous release on my freedom, and I did all sorts of reckless things that I wouldn't have previously done.
Joanne, how do your siblings respond to partners that you've had in the past?
I look back and say that I was 5 years with a lover, and we broke up, and it was just sort of like, you know, and I kept talking to my brother and saying, I've had a really horrible year. There was lots of things that went on, and he would talk about, because of a financial thing that she and I were in, I was in, I had financial difficulty, and that's all he wanted to concentrate on, was the financial difficulty of moving, of having to buy a new house and all that. And I kept saying, no, I'm devastated by the breakup of this relationship, and it was like, no recognition, no nothing. Now, you know, if he got divorced, let's put it in the New York Times, you know? Let's call the poor boy up, poor baby, you know, you know? And so, and it's very hard, you know, when in my family's quite quote-unquote liberal, it's all very accepted, and it's all very, you know, oh, sure, they don't ask any questions. They don't really want to know. They don't ask in-depth things.
The final question, maybe leading on from that, is just very quickly, what is the dream? If it's not the great romantic marriage or whatever, they're all different. What is the perfect relationship? I'm looking at you because you've got a one-word answer, I guess.
The one I've already got. What a surprise!
That's great, Peter. Is that the man you were talking about?
What, the perfect relationship?
Yes.
The perfect relationship is the next man I meet.
Joanne, what's yours?
I guess a perfect relationship to me is a mutual sharing of love and respect, and that can be with. I have perfect relationships with several different kinds of people. In my life.
Simon, don't feel you have to name names. I mean, goodness me.
God, it's a difficult question. I mean, I like your answer very much. I suppose to continue feeling all the good things that I have felt over a protracted period of time.
Clara?
Well, I mean, I think I sort of relate to men as a kind of a mother, and I relate to women as a sort of a daughter. Well, it would be quite a perfect one, would be a reciprocal one. Sometimes you could be the mother, and sometimes you could be the daughter.
Derek?
Well, I've never been happier than I am at the moment in my life.
That's good enough. I thought we'd toast that. I think we'd toast that. I'd like to toast to all the differences that everybody, and the people who've been on before. What I'd like to do is I'd like to toast to difference, to us, and to gay pride.
Toasting.
Early results of tonight's telephone poll show that 82% of men and 70% of women would like to be able to get married to a same-sex partner. Telephone lines will stay open until midnight, and the full results will be revealed in next week's